Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Dental Realist podcast. I am Dr. Ryder Waldron and I'm joined as usual by Dr. Marcus D. Neff and Dr. Troy Stevens. Troy, how's it going tonight?
Really well. I'm having a great time. Glad to have a fantastic guest on tonight, so I don't have to listen to YouTube. We'll just talk about stuff.
And we are very selective about our guests, so this is a really good guest tonight. Marcus, how are you doing? You kind of lined up our guests, so tell us how you're doing, and then we'll get to our guest.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Just finished a great day of dentistry and back home and just ready to do a nice podcast tonight. We've got a great guest, so I'm excited.
Yeah, and I got to tell you first, Marcus, before we get to our guest, that I think I may have already told you this, but my son this week asked about Larry Bird and who Larry Bird was. And I told him that he had to be in the top 10 basketball players of all time from the 80s and 90s. So,
yeah, I told you, and remember I told you top 10 80s, 90s. How about top 5 of all time?
Yeah, you might be right. So, yeah, and we're really excited about our guest tonight. So, with the cost of running a dental practice getting more expensive, insurance reimbursements going down, we've talked about that a lot on here. It's more important than ever to be efficient financially, try to save as much money as you can while you're running a private practice. Our guest tonight can help private practices find ways to get some of the same supply savings that DSO practices get. He also has a background in transitions and consulting, and we're going to talk about how the marketplace is changing and how private practice dentists can stay competitive. So we'd like to welcome Caleb Carter of the Ion Dental Group to the Dental Realist podcast. Caleb, how's it going tonight?
It's going really good. I'm honored to be a part of this awesome podcast that you guys have put together.
We're happy to have you on.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background? First of all, give our listeners, in case they don't know who you are, a little bit of history on you.
Yeah, so I started my journey in dental. It's been almost 13 years now since I got into dental. I started actually on the dark side, as some of the dentists would refer to as a salesman for Patterson Dental. So I spent some time, and the thing I love, by the way, about your guys' podcast is how real it is and how you guys just kind of lay it out like you see it. And there's no politics or politicking. And so, as we speak tonight, I'm excited because, as I've listened to some of the others, with my background, I kind of see how dentists, see what we do and how we do, and you guys lay it out there. But with that experience, I worked for Patterson Dental for almost 8 years. And then I branched out from there and worked in consulting, and have been doing consulting and transition work for the last 4 years, and tied into a pretty big national chain when I started. And then through that, we've developed a lot of these different avenues and one of them being Ion Dental Group, because as we explored all these options and looking at these buy and sell transactions and consulting, we noticed a very common theme. And that is that the general dentist has got a totally different playing field than even 10 years ago. And we need to try and be an advocate for them. And so, through all our different angles and putting this together, the Ion Dental Group came together, and excited to kind of talk about that and maybe some of the trends that we're seeing in dentistry.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great.
So tell us a little bit more about the start of Ion Dental Group. Is it you? Was it a group of dentists? How did that come about?
Yeah, so it actually started as a little bit of a brainstorm, but a good dentist friend of ours, Kurt Carpenter, Marcus, you probably know him.
I do.
He was the original founder of it, but it actually started about 5 or 6 years ago. We were looking at things and said, man, this, and it started with the main national corporate dentistry starting to come, and we started to say, well, how can we compete? How can the general dentist compete? And so we formed a small group with 4 or 5 dentists, and you probably see this in your areas right now. And we said, well, we're going to try and get some economies of scale, right? Some leverage. So we did this, and our original idea started as, well, we're going to become our own Patterson Dental or Darby Dental or whatever, and we're going to go directly to the source, negotiate. But we found out when we started that was going to be a nightmare, not only for us, but for the people that we did business with, right? And so through trial and error over the last 4 or 5 years, we've settled in with a major distributor and negotiated some really, really good rates. But really, it all came down to a way for us to help level the playing field, and not only in purchasing, but maybe some other avenues that dentists need help with in their marketing and in their websites and in their transition work, consulting work. So,
what were the hurdles? You kind of indicated that there were some hurdles to turning into your own Darby Dental Group or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, some of the struggles you faced.
You think about it logistically, right? Like if we wanted to do something on just a small local scale, it would have been a lot easier. But logistically, we thought if we really want to help dentists across the nation, we got to have an infrastructure. And that infrastructure is key, right? We could go somewhere and negotiate a deal, but then it's getting everything to every dentist across the United States in 2 days or less, right? That's a huge deal, because just as you mentioned in one of your previous podcasts, I can't remember which one, but we talk about what these patients want, right? They want everything. They want good service at a low price, right?
Yeah.
And that hit us. The same thing with dentists. They want great service at a low price. And we tried to find a way to accomplish that. And the only way that we settled on is going with one of these bigger suppliers, because we can get the service that they're used to with shipping times and everything else, and provide them some of the luxuries of repair work and parts that they need, and even some insight of having someone on a local level be able to help them. And we've been able to do it at a very reasonable and much discounted price.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's hard in a private practice nowadays, where you see these DSOs that have a lot of advantages that we can't get. What are some of the challenges that you see that private practices currently face from a business perspective?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing, and there's some interesting numbers that just came out on some studies there, is the shift of dentistry and the shift of where dentists are going. And in some of your previous podcasts, you guys really touched on that. A lot of that has to do with the cost that these new grads are coming out with, and the debt service that they have to carry throughout private practice. But if you think about it, some of these numbers are really changing, and the biggest one is in the most recent study is that they said in the next 10 years, about 35% of dental practices will be what we call a regional DSO. Somebody that isn't necessarily national, but that might come into, a town or a part of a state or a part of a couple states and have a presence of, 8 to 15 offices. So not trying to conquer the nation, but trying to conquer an area. And that changes a lot of the face of dentistry, because those people are typically people that are banding together, whether that be out of selling their practice or portions of their practice to try and get this leverage that they're after. And that's changing the landscape a lot, even more so than what we would consider normal corporate dentistry.
So
Absolutely.
That's interesting. That's an interesting number. So 35%, you think in 10 years will be some kind of regional DSO. What other challenges will there be that private practice dentists will face in the next 10 years? Do you see any others, or is that just the main one right there?
No, with that comes leverage, right? And that's where we came with, and thinking, not only is cost of what these other competitors are going to get is going to be a little bit lower in most regards. But there's also other things like management fees and ability to manage people, and how to keep an eye on the overhead, and how to know, what our position is within relative to our competitors, and those challenges with corporate dentistry and regional DSOs are real. And the general dentist has got to be able to find a way, not necessarily compete directly with them, but find a way to balance that in their practice and in their life, so that they don't stress out and burn out, and not want to do it. And I think that's a huge challenge for general dentistry right now is these dentists understanding, and this is where you guys are so awesome, but understanding what it's really like and being prepared for what private practice is.
Yeah. Can I follow up a question? When I was reading your bio and things, Do you guys deal mostly with the supply side of things, or do you guys do any negotiating with insurance companies with reimbursement rates of a DSO or anything like that? Have you found any of that stuff to be beneficial?
Yeah, so what we've tried to do is instead of just focusing, I mean, supplies are definitely a big portion of what we do, but as people get a chance to look through our site, we have different relationships with other people inside of dental, whether that be consulting, transitions, Profitable PPOs is one of our partners, and they work solely in that negotiation realm of insurances. And so we're trying to bring a scale to these private practices and make them aware at a cost that's very reasonable for them to at least get the information,
Awesome.
So is that where you see the biggest, the biggest downfall? Is it in the business, the running of the business is that where the real challenge is in the running of the business and trying to save money that way? It's not so much the actual dentistry that is hurting private practices right now?
Well, I think
that makes sense.
I can't speak to the quality of dentistry as well as you guys can, right? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and profess that I've been a dentist, but I've seen dentistry from a lot of different angles that are pretty unique. I haven't necessarily been niched, but to answer your question, I feel like the biggest challenge facing private practice is these dentists being able to find their identity and understand what that means for them, and to be able to build. I look at dentistry as a vehicle for them to get not only what they need, but to give exactly what their patients are asking for. Okay. And if we build this vehicle that drives us crazy, it's a horrible vehicle, and we need to rebuild it, right? Yeah. And we need to make it something that we enjoy.
So, Caleb, here's something I wanted to ask. In today's world of dentistry, clinically, there's more and more technology that's involved, and a lot of that technology isn't cheap, but it's becoming the standard. CEREC, cone beam, all these things. Can a solo dentist incorporate that into their practice and actually thrive, or do you see those things as being more in the realm of a large group where they're the most beneficial?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question, by the way, Marcus, because as we consult and go across the nation and we see people that are wanting to either retire or do better, you look at that balance sheet and that P&L, and a lot of them are carrying a very significant debt on that equipment. Yeah. And it's eating them up in a lot of ways. I think the answer to that question is no. I don't think it's just for DSOs or larger corporations. But what I would say is if that can bring some excitement to your life and some joy to what you do, that's one thing. But you better be really, really educated on when you make that move about what that's going to cost you and what the long-term effect is of getting that equipment, because no matter how much joy it brings you, if it eventually sucks the life out of you because you can't take home a paycheck, then it doesn't matter how much joy you get out of producing your own crown or seeing a 3D skull if it doesn't make financial sense, because it'll eventually choke you out.
Right.
Yeah, show people their skull in 3 dimensions over and over again, but it doesn't bring home and provide for the family, It's like, it's really cool, but is it necessary, Well,
yeah, and we had
that before.
Sorry, Troy. We had Steve Parker on us, been several months ago or almost a year ago, probably, and he said that he will meet with dentists and they'll ask like what the guy across the street's doing, because he's got this big, beautiful new practice. How's he make it? What's he doing? And Steve said, well, he's just running himself into bankruptcy. So, having somebody give you some good business advice is probably important, because when we got out of school, it seemed like, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, we were led to believe that everybody would have a CEREC in their office. Everybody would have, cone beams and all this other stuff. And I mean, you guys know I'm like the cheapest person alive. I don't have either of those things, but I still seem to be surviving. And I think this is great, because I think there's a lot of young dentists that get out and they feel pressure to add all this technology to their offices. And if it's not going to be paying for itself plus adding some, some extra money to take home, it just doesn't seem worth it right now. Is that true? And for young dentists right now?
Well, yeah, and I think the beautiful thing too that's happening in that world in a degree is some of the pricing of that and some of those pieces of technology is starting to shrink just a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to some of the radiography. I mean, you guys remember the day when you guys started, and it was like 3D kind of didn't really exist probably, and a digital pano was as good as it got,
Yeah.
And now you look at a digital pano, and you can buy one of those for next to nothing. Right, and your 3D machines are starting to get a little bit more reasonable in some ways. But the beautiful thing about technology is what I love about it is it offers some access for you to maybe do some procedures that you didn't do before. But you better make darn well and be ready that just because you have the information now to place implants or to do molar endo, that you're prepared to do those procedures, and then more importantly, be prepared to talk about and address those with your patients, so that if you make the leap, you at least got some extra revenue. But a new dentist coming out, I would tell them to be very, very aware of number one, what they're buying, but number two, what does that mean? Every piece of equipment we buy has something attached to that, and that's being able to pay for that piece of equipment. And we better be able to make a good financial decision and do some financial analysis to say, yeah, I can either make this payment or I can't make this payment.
Yeah. In our environment nowadays, you really have to be able to run a business in dentistry. I think we talked about this previous podcasts and stuff, but it used to be back in the day you could just go in, hang a shingle, put your sign out there, and then people would just flock to you, and you didn't even have to worry about the business. It kind of just took care of itself. Where today we have a complete opposite situation, that if you neglect your business, you're going to fail, and they do fail. What do you think about like the doctors that are in the middle of where they basically, don't really want to run a business, but they, are getting kind of caught in this middle part where it's kind of transitioning to this DSO? What point would you say that it's wise for a guy to maybe look at selling to a DSO or something along these lines?
Well, I think that's a pretty loaded question, because kind of my philosophy at this idea of making a private practice thrive, that's a loaded question, and that's different for everybody. Some people may say making a private practice thrive means that, we're producing or collecting $1.5 million and our overhead is at 55%, right? And we're making some money. Some other people, would say dentistry thriving is me working 3 days a week and making $140,000. So this idea of the DSO coming in and changing people's lives is real. But to answer your question, I think number one is if you don't like what you're currently doing, you need to find a way to before I would go and sell, especially if I'm mid-career, to find if I can change my trajectory in my thoughts and in my feelings and how I feel about what I do or in my practice, before I would go and entertain, a complete sell in a DSO in some way, because once you sell it, you're never going to get it back.
Right.
And,
yeah, that's true.
And, although it may sound good, and there's a lot of things, trust me, that are good about it for several dentists. But once you let go of the asset, you're not going to get it back. And for some people, that's the perfect move, right? Some people, it's the perfect move. And we're dealing with a great example right now. Dentist is 52, has ran a pretty good practice. He called us in to do some consulting work. The practice starts generating more and more money for him. But guess what? The money isn't his thought of thriving. It's I don't want to deal with the staff. I don't want to have to fill another phone call after hours about a toothache. He's like at his phone on the weekends thinking, "Oh, please don't be the toothache call."
Yes.
That you all get. And you say, "I don't want to leave my kid's soccer game
Absolutely.
to go check this out. And so, for him, the idea of thriving is not necessarily the money or the financial gain. It was, what's my peace of mind and knowing that when I show up in the morning, I do my work, and when I leave it there. And for him, it's the right move. So he's making that move. He's selling his practice, and it's the perfect move for him. He's going to go find a place to work, and he'll probably even work back in this practice for the next couple of years. And he's like, hey, I'm going to be just fine. I'll make good money practicing dentistry. It may not be as much, but I don't have to have some of the stresses that I want to avoid.
I really like that, Caleb. So when you guys go in to consult with an office, you're looking to do what's best for the dentist, not just say, hey, we gotta produce more in this office, you're going to be happier. Like, you give them some options that just staying in this private practice is not the end all be all. We could make you happier doing something else. Or, do you help kind of guide them along that career path? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. Well, you bet. You think about it. I mean, who cares if you're working your guts out and you're completely miserable?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a horrible way to live life. And I think in private practice, it's okay to be uncomfortable. I think this notion, and in today's mentality a little bit, the notion is, well, we always got to be happy. There's no such thing as hard times or that type of stuff. But in the end, you guys have got a phenomenal tool to be able to really help people. And if you can't find a way to do that with inside your private practice, and you've reached out and really tried, then there is no shame in making a move that will allow you to find that peace and comfort, because you got to practice. You got to practice for years. You have debt that you have to service, and you got to do something. And so you might as well be happy trying to do it.
Do you see many dentists just dropping dentistry? They've practiced for, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and they're just like, I want to go do something else with my career.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in the middle of one now.
Yeah.
And we just finished one later in the year where, dentist was late 40s and said, you know what, this isn't what I signed up for. The idea of me doing this for the rest of my days is miserable. And he decided to go ahead and move his practice, sold it at a great price, and is taking his family and his kids. He decided to do some transportation stuff, and he's doing a complete shift. And I'm really proud of him, to tell you the truth, because that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But he put his foot down and said enough is enough, and he made that move. And it's a hard move to make. And I'm not saying that's the smart move in every regard, but you gotta be able to pivot in life and business. You gotta be able to pivot if it's not working for you. Find a different way to do it, or find some avenues that can help you find that fulfillment and still make the ends meet.
When you work with an office, do you typically find that when you help them fix the financial side of things and get the business side of things running more smoothly, that their overall general stress diminishes and they find more gratification in dentistry?
Yeah, I think that has a big part to do with it. I think it all comes back to, if you look at life in whole, and we'll just talk about divorce rates, right? Like, one of the very, very top reasons that people get divorced is financial issues.
Sure.
Right? They can't find that balance and that comfort. And dentistry is the same way. If you can't find some financial security in what you do, it's really, really hard to run the pace that you guys have to run. I mean, you guys have to see, in some cases, 30, 40, 50 people in a day. That's a lot of work,
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. And I mean, pardon my French, sometimes I don't know how you guys feel, but maybe you guys sometimes feel like, man, lie on a factory assembly line trying to take care of all these people, and it wears you out.
Yeah.
It's got to wear you out.
40 or 50 patients. Troy does that before lunch.
Yeah, if I was seeing 40 or 50, I would be excited. No, I do not see. That's
so. What would you tell a new guy coming out of school, somebody just getting started, how would he structure? What should he look at? How should he embark on his career to get himself in the best position to be happy, to succeed?
Man, number one, I feel like is a huge deal, is coming out of school with the least amount of debt as you possibly can.
Boom.
And it is so hard for these grads, for a lot of them to kind of wrap themselves around that, right? They come out. So I think there's, number one, not only is tuition costs being crazy, but cost of living is more. But the other thing you see is a lack of what I would call this ability to grind or grit it out. I know several dentists that are, 50 and 55 now that actually held a part-time job through dental school, right? Like they were trying to avoid debt at all costs. So number one, I would try and minimize that debt as much as possible. If there's an ability for you to get on any of these scholarships with the Army or anything like that, I would do everything I can. I would live in a dump. I would not drive nice cars. I would eat Vienna sausage and ramen noodles.
Yeah. And that's not glamorous. That's not what somebody going into dental school or coming out into dentistry thinks automatically, right?
Yeah, but I mean, take you guys in school. I never went to dental school. My brother did. But take you guys in school, and you can probably look across your class and you can say, man, this guy's like, he's not afraid to drive a new car or buy these things or those things because he knows that this paycheck is coming, right?
Yeah.
He knows it's coming. Then you got the other guy. It's like, I can't imagine how that guy's even living. Like, are those the same pair of jeans he's worn all week? But I would say that those guys in a financial position position themselves a lot better for private practice than the guys that come out just loaded up to the hilt before they go. Because as you all know, and probably people on your podcast know, if they're owners, there's the margins in private practice dentistry sometimes can be not real good. Yeah. And if you have to service a take-home debt that's pretty healthy, then it's a lot tougher to feel comfortable about where you're at.
Are you seeing the student debt that grads are coming out with now as a limiting factor in like where and how they're going to practice? Do they buy a practice versus going into a DSO? Does that have any effect on their decision making right now?
I would like to say no, but I think that would be a lie. Yeah. I think it definitely does. I mean, I'll take my own brother, for example, coming out of school, he's working for Heartland, and why not? Number one, it gives you a phenomenal ability to see how, some of these organizations are run and what they expect out of a profitable dental office. Maybe not necessarily how they treat and can really bring a personal touch to dental, but what are the nuts and bolts, right? Like, what does my overhead have to be? How do they look at this marketing, and how does that work? And more importantly, get those times going. I mean, that's to be able to produce, and you can do that comfortably in a lot of ways with these places and get a lot of good reps in. And really, if you're observant, so if anybody's on this podcast that's looking to go private practice, be observant where you're practicing your dentistry right now. And especially if it's in these corporations, try and look at the numbers, try and look at the staff members, try and figure out what they're after, because those metrics will transfer into your private practice.
So Troy and Marcus, you guys will probably remember this from dental school and I can't think of who the professor was that recommended when we get out of dental school, we need to buy a Mercedes and look like a dentist, have possessions that make us look rich and things like that. Do you guys remember that? It was like,
right in the first year of dentistry.
Yeah. Because he said that the guy that just got out of high school and drove a truck for $40,000 a year was already, $160,000 ahead of us, and then for the next 4 years, another $160,000, whatever. And so we needed to catch up by making some money, but also look like we're rich, so our dentists or our patients would respect us. And I think that was some of the worst advice we could have possibly received in dental school.
Terrible advice. Terrible advice.
Run that by me one more time.
Okay, so his thinking was that we went to 4 years of college, so we weren't making much money. Maybe we had a part-time job, but basically we were making zero. So, for somebody that got right out of high school, he started, driving a truck or, some job making $40,000 a year. So we made $40,000 a year for those first 4 years, made $160,000 more than we had made. Then we went to dental school for 4 years, and he made $160,000 for those 4 years that we were in dental school. And so we're $320,000 behind. So we've got to start recouping that. We've got to start catching up, and we've got to look like we're dentists so our patients will respect us.
We got to start catching up by going behind.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said, go out. He said, you want to be driving a Mercedes. You want to be driving,
really did.
You want to look like you're doing well because that's what patients want to see is that you're successful.
Yeah.
It's like, that is terrible advice.
I thought it was stupid. I still think it's stupid. And I'm sure Caleb would not give any dentist that type of advice.
Well, I think in some way it actually works against you. And I think it depends on where you practice too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can't tell you how many times we do phone surveys when we go in to these dental offices, and the number one concern in every single practice is how can these people and through the reviews of the patients from the actual phone calls, how was the treatment explained to me, and were the financial arrangements made clear, and do I understand them? That's the number one hot point for every single patient. For the most part, and to see them, to see you rolling up in a Mercedes and have this, all this debt, and their number one concern is how are we going to pay for that? Sometimes that can be a negative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the flip
patients
side of that,
feel like they're paying for all of it, right?
Yeah. On the flip side of that, you can't have like a rundown, crappy looking practice and drive up in a, Ford Taurus with the doors falling off. I mean, you got to maintain,
some professionalism.
Yeah, some professionalism. Yeah. But I think that would be, you nailed it. I mean, be smart, be disciplined, because if you can be disciplined when you're young, the power of leverage and compounding when you're old is amazing. You'll be able to enjoy that life that you wanted to when you're older. But you got to be disciplined when you're younger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's totally true. I like what you said about the people in dental school that are, kind of living beyond their means there, and then the ones that are kind of grinding it out, living poor, doing that. And it seemed like when we got out of dental school, they kept the people, no matter how they were living, kept those same habits. And we see, some people went to dental school living like Beverly Hills, and they're always on social media showing off how rich they are and things like that. And then you got the three of us who, we're not, Marcus isn't driving a Taurus, I don't think. But I would like
Accord. He's got an Accord.
Yeah. I would like to think.
I was really offended by the Taurus.
Yeah.
Driving,
but the three of us try to be a little more conservative in our spending. And I don't know. I think being financially smart is such an important thing to learn in dental school, because it seems to carry through into your dental career. So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 10 years from now, if we were to jump into the future, what does the practice of dentistry look like? Do we still have private practices?
Oh yeah. I mean, from all the studies that I see in reports from some of these, I mean, these are people like the big corporations in the world that are trying to figure out where the market's going, right? Because they service these dentists. They're saying their projections in 10 years, 35% would be what we call this regional DSO, 10% would be what we call national DSO or corporate dentistry. And that leaves you right around that 50 to 55%, being private practice. Now that's projections. I think the point was made earlier, projections aren't always reality. And from what I see in these DSOs, and a lot of times is they get a lot of these new talent because that's where they need to go. But a lot of them don't stay there long term. I still see so many young dentists wanting to own, wanting to be an owner, wanting to create one of these regional DSOs themselves, that I feel like private practice dentistry will be alive, and I think it'll be fine. It might look different depending on what you want and what your comfort level is with with running a business, but I think it'll be there because I see these young dentists wanting to be there. They want to have that experience.
Is that the number one reason people are still going to dental school, is to own their own practice? Or maybe not the number one reason, but that's their goal, is to own their own practice at some point? Because when we started, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, guys, but that was definitely my goal, and I felt like that's why most people went to dental school, was or the number one goal of practice was to own their own practice. Are you still seeing that now, Caleb, with people going to dental school and getting out of dental school?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any numbers to back that up. I just have it from all the contacts that we talk to people that are looking for practices, right? I mean, I have people calling me on a weekly basis that are, a year out from graduating, and they're saying, "Hey, find me a spot. Find me a spot. I want to be there." So I know there's a demand. The question is the demand a reality? And I can tell you what. The transitions that we do that have these dentists that have either went through these programs where school is paid for, or have a very low overhead as far as what they have on their books to cover, they're in a so much better position than the people trying to buy, because they don't have to necessarily buy as big of a practice to make it work.
Yeah, are you seeing Caleb? Are you seeing these guys that are coming out of school that want to buy practices? Are they having any trouble arranging finances? Say, a guy's $350,000 to $500,000. He wants to buy a $500,000 practice. Are banks still giving out money for that kind of thing?
Yes, they still are. But the answer to that is yes. They're having problems. I mean, without some history. Right. Or some ability to say, hey, this guy can produce, right? Mm-hmm. This guy can do dentistry. Yeah. I mean, it's not like it used to be where, right out of school, a lot of these guys can just jump right in because the debt loads are so high. Yeah. And so, those years, not only to prove themselves, but the banks want to see, hey, man, this is a lot of debt. Can this guy do it? Right. Can he make it happen? And they're kind of pigeonholed into some of these other practices that are doing much bigger numbers, because the bank is going to look at it just like any good business would and say, here's our debt load, right? This guy has X amount, and for him to cover his own personal debt, he needs to be generating X amount of dollars. And so sometimes you can't buy, the $400,000 to $500,000 practices because they're not profitable enough at the time for them to purchase them. When really that's the best practice probably for them to buy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When we came out of school, literally, when I bought my house, I'm still in the same house, haven't moved. The bank kind of laughed at me when I asked them how little I wanted for this thing. I hadn't even turned a drill at all. I had a note saying that, I'm going to be working for these people. But these guys were willing to give me any number of money that I needed to buy anything I wanted because I was a dentist. And I thought that was amazing. I was like, wow, it's like, don't do it. Don't go be buying no big house or anything like that right off the bat. And I just was wondering if nowadays, if, things have tightened up, because, financially, it's a lot different world now than it was back then too.
Yeah. So let me just tell you a little bit of the change. And this is just from a conversation today. I'm really good friends and work a lot with one of the leaders of Practice Pathways of Zion National Bank. And we were talking actually this morning on, how's the dental lending world doing? What does it look like? And he goes, man, we just had this big change today that in dental practices, they're trying to get them to be what they call special use buildings, right? So that will lower the ability for amount of purchases when it comes to real estate assets on a dental practice to 65% versus the going that it has been at 80%. So you better believe that they're taking a look at these way differently than they were a decade ago or 20 years ago. They're making really good financial decisions on these practices.
Yeah, that is good. That might keep some people out of trouble, I guess.
Yeah, I think it will. And it hedges the banks, right? Protects them so they don't make a bad move.
Yeah.
So with a group like Ion Dental Group, why would I think we've made a good case here, but why would a private practice want to engage with a group like Ion Dental Group?
Yeah. So we're definitely not like the only option out there, right? We feel like we're the option that's got some really good parts to it. But the reason they would want to do that is it gives you leverage, right? You're going to the table with Crest, with BioHorizons, with MegaGen, with Patterson Dental, who's our distributor. You're going to the table with millions and millions of dollars worth of purchasing power. And you're saying, hey, we're here together. We want the best that's good for our group. And let's figure out how this works to make it more profitable for everybody that's under us. So, the reason why you would want to do that is if you're going to run a practice as a private practice anyway, you might as well find avenues that you can get what you want, right? Which we talked about very first. We want the best service at the best price, right? Yeah. I think the days of saying, oh, well, we've got a rep that shows up and there's definitely value add there. And this is why we chose Patterson, obviously, is we feel like there is value that comes with having boots on the ground close to you that might be able to help you get things when you need them, answer some questions about the local area. Service is a big deal, being able to have you up and running if something breaks down. So we took a little bit different approach and partnered with Patterson because we felt like it was an ability for us to provide what we feel most dentists need is not only a pricing solution, but a solution that can help you save a significant amount of money on repairs that might happen in your office, credit card processing fees that you have to pay, lab fees. We've negotiated some great thing with labs, but we're just trying to take the economy that Heartland Dental and some of these bigger people get and trying to bring it to a private practice dentist so that they can enjoy not just a discount on supplies, but a discount on some of the other things that they have and some tools like fee analysis and practice analysis and equipment evaluations that can help them kind of level the playing field in a way against their competition.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Can a dentist anywhere in the country work with Ion Dental Group?
You bet. Yep. That's the other reason why we chose to partner with a national vendor. Not only can they work with us, but they can get their shipments in 2 days or less for almost anywhere across the nation.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, Caleb, can you tell all of our listeners how they could get in contact with you and in contact with the Ion Dental Group if they're interested in partnering with you?
Yeah, for sure. So you can check us out online. www.iondentalgroup.com is the website. You can see what we do. We have all our contact information up there. Cool. If you're looking to transition or look at some consulting services, you can find us through Ion Dental Group, where I'm a partner there, but you can also find us on www.trustedpracticetransitions.com. Our email and contact information will all be right there.
Cool. Well, Caleb, thanks so much for being on with us tonight. I thought this was great information, guys. I wish I'd had this information when I got out of dental school, to be honest.
Yeah, it would be very
for sure. That would have been way nice.
Mean, really, it would be great for new dentists to have information like this because it's tough going sometimes. So, Caleb, thanks so much for being on with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I'll give a little plug out for anybody listening to this. Your guys' mentor program sounds awesome. And if you're members of this podcast, man, keep it real. You guys keep going with what you're doing because I feel like the information is real and informative and not sugarcoated. And I just love that about what you guys do.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Caleb.
Well, this has been episode 41 of the Dental Realist podcast, and we will talk to you on episode 42. Thanks for joining us.